You a fan of NASCAR, and if you are, I'd like to know why. And if you are an African American viewer, I'd particularly like to know what you think of it. Is there a reason that you don't find yourself attracted to it? And what's your take so far on what the Millers have told us about racing and racism? If you do want to join in, here's how you do it. You can email your thoughts or your opinions, perhaps your personal perspective to me. A couple of ways to do that. You log on to csnphilly.com and then put in It's Your Call or IYC under the search button. That'll take you to my webpage where you can leave me a comment and I will make sure that Len and Lenny get them. You can also email me directly right here at the show. That's TCN_IYC at ComcastNetwork.com. And as always, you can find us on Facebook, MySpace, and YouTube. Okay, so we've been talking a little bit about at the corporate level and behind the scenes in terms of racism or what you call pervasive attitude toward black-owned teams. But how about in the stands? When we show those pictures, you know, they show a predominantly white fan base. You say it's because they don't have someone to root for. But certainly the drivers who are on the course, the white drivers, are exciting to watch. Why wouldn't the African Americans get behind some of them?
That brings up other elements. The NASCAR has politicized the sport. So for instance, when George Bush was in office, they flew him down on Air Force One with Condoleezza Rice, I think at least once, if not twice, during his two terms in the White House. So when most African Americans, statistically, it's 90% vote Democrat and 10% are Republican. So when they see a George Bush and Condoleezza Rice flown into the racetrack, that's a turnoff, in addition to no one to root for.
So if Barack Obama went to a stock car race, do you think maybe all of a sudden there would be more of an interest by African Americans?
I think that would help. I think it's going to take a lot of time, but when you fly in the Republican president, in addition to all the other things, the rebel flags you still see, especially at the grassroots level, and then the Republican president, and then you say, we want African American fans, that's a turnoff, and then they've even flown in Clarence Thomas maybe 10 years ago, which 90% of the blacks do not respect Justice Thomas. So they're like, we don't want to have, we see rebel flags, there's no one to root for, they're flying in Clarence Thomas.
Probably the rebel flags would be the biggest red flag.
It all adds into we're not really interested, at least at this time.
And yet you've seen a growth in NASCAR among women and among white professional women, and there are not women on the race course for the most part.
Yes, and the ARCA race just 2 weeks ago, counting Danica Patrick, there were 7 women in the race. So you have now maybe 5 or 6 women in the major NASCAR-related races, which brings up another point. I always say privately that if the women can get through and win a race, and then a black male driver can come through after that, because the women have to break the egg.
Yeah, we thought it was going to be that in the White House too, but it didn't quite go that way, did it?
Yes.
That theory didn't work out so well for Hillary.
Yeah, you're correct. You're absolutely correct. Yes.
But you think that women are going to be enjoying more success in the industry?
Yes.
Eventually?
Yes.
Okay, Danica certainly does a lot for the image of women in racing, but until she starts to put some wins in the win column, really doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah. But from a marketing standpoint, I mean, she has tremendous added value, because since she gets since she gets out of the racing magazine, she's in the general media, she gets in all the women's magazines, around the world. And for a sponsor and advertisers, corporations, I mean, there's huge value there.
Yeah, I can see the value right there on our screen. Thank you, producer. I really appreciate that. Okay, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to have some more comments on NASCAR and why it appeals or does not appeal to the African American community. If you are a NASCAR fan, regardless of the color of your skin, I want to hear from you. So go ahead and email me right here at the show, and we'll talk to you when we come back.
Transportation for It's Your Call guests provided by Preferred Car and Limousine.
Thanks for joining us once again, everyone. I'm Lynn Doyle. This is It's Your Call, and our topic this hour is racing while black. Now, if you've watched this show for any amount of time, you know that we have done numerous shows on driving while black because there's always been some issues with the African American community when they're on the highway. Well, what I learned after reading this new book that's written by Leonard T. Miller is that there are some issues on the race course when driving as well among the African American community. We're learning all about it. He is here, Lenny Miller is here with us, along with his father, Leonard W. Miller, who was the founder of the first black-owned racing group, Miller Racing Group, that was very successful for its time. I want to talk a little bit about that because a lot of your experiences, Leonard, are recounted in Lenny's book, and some of them show a huge amount of struggle, and others show great signs of success.
Yes, it's very, very uneven, and the NASCAR success was minimal in comparison to the open wheel IndyCar and drag racing successes that we have had.
You actually started as a young boy or young man driving yourself. You were a drag racer right
Yes.
in outside of Philadelphia,
yes,
right?
Yes, Vargo Dragway is where my friend John Griswold started me out seriously racing there, and that was in the 60s, and then we went higher heights from there.
And you raced or had cars race in all of the local venues around the Delaware Valley.
Yes. We've had ATCO. We were the first African Americans to be in the top 10 points, and there we won at Englishtown, Maple Grove, and other venues, and Vargo.
I was surprised to learn when reading the book, Lenny, that African Americans actually started driving professionally as far back as the 20s. And, you know, we're talking about this like it's a new phenomenon, like, oh, look, blacks are now, you know, behind the wheel. But, in fact, they've been around for a long time doing this.
Yeah, and it's all forgotten history, or they're in footnotes, or people don't even think about it. So it goes back to 1910 with Jack Johnson, who was the heavyweight boxing champion. He raced Barney Oldfield, who was a famous, you know, racer at that time in 1910 on Long Island, New York. And there's a lot of racing history in the 20s and 30s where they had African-American racing clubs and groups similar to like the Negro baseball leagues due to segregation. But there were dozens and hundreds of drivers in Indiana, Southern California, Georgia, you know, decades ago.
So a lot of that history is covered in the book, and you felt it was important to kind of let people know that there had been literally nearly a century of black racers.
Yeah, because usually when we get into the media or press, African Americans and the mainstream community, oh, this is new, they're starting out, you know, today, but this has been going on for pre-World War II and after the turn of the century.
What impact do you think the Miller Racing Group, which was founded by your father, had on not only NASCAR and the Indianapolis 500 and other levels of racing, but on African Americans in the sport as well?
I think the book itself, I think the book will outline that we're actually active in the sport, you know, up to present day. And it outlines a lot of the obstacles and things you have to think about to overcome to progress in the sport. And you definitely have to think, you know, unorthodox and out of the box on your presentations and how you go after sponsors and what sponsors you select to even go after to find any success.
What were some of the biggest obstacles that you faced?
The corporate boardroom was the biggest obstacle.